Hey, good Monday afternoon, everybody. I'm KHOU11 meteorologist Tim Pandajis, and boy, did it get busy over the weekend. We've got 3 named storms out in the Atlantic Basin, plus we're also going to talk about Hillary, that's now post-tropical, after making landfall in Southern California yesterday. And in the Gulf of Mexico, PTC-9, potential tropical cyclone 9, will likely also become a named storm, and that would be Harold. Today is Monday, the 21st of August, 2023. So here's the latest headlines. We had 3 named storms develop in 24 hours. That's only happened 2 other times in recorded history. The Gulf of Mexico system, as I mentioned, likely to become a named storm itself. That would get the name of Harold. And impacts from all of the systems I mentioned will be impacting Hispaniola. Tropical storm Franklin will be moving inland there in the next 24 hours. And also South Texas for PTC-9, which will become Harold, likely making a jump in intensity just before landfall about 24 hours from now. Let's start off in the Gulf of Mexico looking at infrared satellite imagery and all the stats coming in this hour with 1 o'clock advisory. Winds have increased to 35 miles per hour. Could be categorized as a tropical depression at this point, but it likely also isn't satisfying the closed center of circulation yet to get that upgrade to a named storm, which is why it's still a potential tropical cyclone. Overall, it's very spread out, a very large system, clusters of thunderstorms pretty much speckled all over the Gulf of Mexico. But when we switch things up to visible satellite imagery, the overall atmospheric spin becomes much more obvious and evident here. You can see that spin in the south central Gulf of Mexico, building its way pretty much due west at a pretty good clip at 16 miles per hour. Now, if it was to slow down a bit, we'd likely see this get much stronger as it takes advantage of a low wind shear environment and also supercharged heat in the Gulf of Mexico. Some of these sea surface temperature readings are the highest they've been on record. So there's plenty of energy for this storm to take advantage of as it moves towards the west. It's got about less than 24 hours over the open Gulf of Mexico for that window of intensification to occur. Let's again revisit our tropical vocabulary for PTC, potential tropical cyclone. What this is it describes a system that does not yet satisfy the definition of a tropical cyclone. It doesn't have that closed center of circulation. Winds are less than 39 miles per hour, but it does pose a threat to land within 48 hours. In this situation, it's less than 24 hours. And this is the best part here. It enables the Hurricane Center to put out a forecast track, as well as issue watches and warnings for those areas that will be threatened by it within the forecast window of time. Here is our track from the National Hurricane Center coming out earlier this morning. And it does strengthen it as it moves off towards the west and hones in on the southern Texas coastline. At this point in time, just ahead of landfall by early tomorrow morning at sunrise, the estimates here are for 45 mile per hour winds. That puts it in a tropical storm. It would get a name, Harold, but I think these numbers are conservative because of what I just mentioned, how warm the Gulf of Mexico is. Also, from where it is currently off to the west to landfall in South Texas, the wind shear environment is quite low, so it's able to stand up properly, has good posture, able to ventilate and take advantage of the warm sea surface temperatures and the overall atmospheric conditions to likely overachieve, I think, as it gets closer to the South Texas coastline. Let's check out an analog here where we look at past storms and similar tracks. We go back to 2020. Do you remember Hannah? It was almost in the same area of the Gulf of Mexico, and it moved towards very similar areas to where PTC-9, eventually Harold, is expected to move. Now, the sea surface temperatures this time around are much warmer, and also the wind shear is much lower. Both 2 ingredients that would likely mean PTC-9 would be stronger, but even in less than ideal conditions, Hannah peaked at a Category 2 hurricane before it made landfall south of Corpus Christi back in July of 2020. Here's how it plays out on our short-range, high-resolution models here by 4:30 tomorrow morning on Tuesday. You can see a spin here definitely developing. It's a little bit more organized just ahead of landfall well south of Corpus Christi, bringing a swath of heavy rain and some gusty winds inland before rapidly weakening by lunchtime on Tuesday with some lingering showers. Now, on the outermost northern fringe of where it makes landfall, we already have that spin in the atmosphere there. So Storm Prediction Center has already issued a level 1 severe threat for mainly the risk for some spin-up brief tornadoes to develop on the outermost bands of this. So that's an aspect you also have to keep in mind here with landfalling tropical systems, the risk for some tornadoes. And that does encompass portions of southeast Texas here, Brazoria, Matagorda, and over into Wharton County for tomorrow morning to afternoon. So we'll keep an eye on that. In terms of the beneficial rain that all of Texans are hoping for, it's really going to be honed in on the forecast track. Right around here, south of Corpus Christi, up to Port Isabel, Brownsville area, South Padre, 1 to 2 to maybe 3 inches of rain. Very, very beneficial and will help drought conditions. But areas to the north, the Houston area that are dealing with extreme drought conditions, this will not be a drought-busting rainfall for us. So what's forcing all the rain and the storm track to stay south and pretty much due west? Well, it's that dominant heat ridge that's been with us all summer long. That ridge is acting as a deflector, forcing it to stay south and steering it westwards inland to South Texas, and that'll also keep most of the rain south as well. Elsewhere in the Atlantic, we've got a very busy basin, and this is not unusual for this time of the year. Once we surpass August 15th, a lot of folks argue that August 15th technically could be the start of when the hurricane season really ramps up to about a month from now when we have the peak of the season by mid-September or so. Check out what's going on out there. We have PTC 9 that we've already talked about, Tropical Storm Franklin, Tropical Storm Gert, Post-Tropical Storm Emily, and then another wave well to the east there that's also got high odds of developing. It may be a race to see who gets heralded first, either this one or this one, although the PTC 9 has got a 90% chance of developing here, and that will likely get the name first. I want to jump over to our other land-threatening system. This is going to be Tropical Storm Franklin. It's got 50-mile-per-hour winds. It's going to be building north, strengthening just a bit more before it moves onshore on the southern coast of the Dominican Republic. Forecast track does take this over land, but it does move it over the highest peak in the Caribbean, Pico Duarte, so this will act to shear that apart briefly before it reemerges in the southwest Atlantic, moves back into favorable environmental conditions, and this could be our second hurricane of the season as it moves safely away from land and into the central Atlantic there. So it just goes to show you that most of the Atlantic is very conducive, sea surface temperature-wise, to development. So we've already crossed off an entire list of our names of 21 for the 2023 season. Again, just within the last 24 hours, Emily, Franklin, and Gert, and soon to be Harold, will be developing out there in the Atlantic Basin. In terms of climatology, the 5th named storm is typically around August 22nd, which we're right in line with that. We already saw. But we've got the 6th, 7th, and potentially 8th named storms coming our way here. That would be a little bit ahead of schedule in terms of climatology when we look at the last 30 years from 1991 to 2020. I want to briefly touch on post-tropical Emily here that really caused prolific flooding in Southern California that you've seen in the headline news for the last 24 hours. It has now moved well inland at a pretty good clip, and now things are starting to improve in Southern California. But boy, what a historic event there with an landfalling tropical system, first time in decades in that particular area. All right, that's it in terms of the tropics. We'll be back with you because we've got several named storms out there. We'll likely have Harold in the Gulf of Mexico within the next couple of hours. You can keep in touch on all the social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and I'm also on TikTok at TimTalkWeather. Enjoy the rest of your Monday.